What happens when the CEO of a fast food chain hears the unfiltered truth about his management while standing in line as a regular customer? Jack Coleman, the 48-year-old founder of Burger Barn, never thought he'd find out this way. Burger Barn had started as a small family business, but over the years, it exploded into a major franchise with over 400 locations. Jack had always prided himself on the values he built the company on: quality food, excellent customer service, and treating employees like family. But as the company grew, so did the distance between him and the day-to-day operations. Lately, he'd been hearing rumors: high turnover rates, employee complaints, and customer service slipping. Emails and reports didn't give him the full picture, so Jack decided to investigate himself. With the help of a professional makeup artist, Jack transformed into Dan, a graying, scruffy retiree looking for part-time work to stay busy. The disguise was flawless wrinkled skin, a salt and pepper wig, glasses, and even prosthetics to reshape his nose and jawline. Nobody would recognize him, especially in a franchise like Burger Barn, where employees rarely met corporate executives. He chose a location in a busy suburban area, one he'd never visited before, and applied as a trainee cashier. A manager, clearly desperate to fill shifts, hired him on the spot without much thought. On his first day, Jack stood nervously behind the counter. He hadn't handled a register in decades, and his hands shook slightly as he tried to memorize the buttons. The lunch rush hit hard, and customers lined up faster than they could be served. But what froze Jack wasn't the chaos, it was the voice of a young cashier, a girl no older than 20, complaining loudly to her coworker just a few feet away. "I can't stand this place," she muttered, slamming a tray onto the counter. "Management doesn't care about us at all. They just pile on more shifts and expect us to deal with it. And don't even get me started on how they treat us when we ask for time off." Jack's stomach churned. He kept his head down, pretending to focus on his training, but his ears were locked on every word. Another employee, a lanky, nervous guy named Kyle, whispered back, "Yeah, I tried talking to the manager about my hours and she just laughed. Said if I didn't like it, I could quit." "Like, what kind of response is that?" the girl, whose name tag read Maya, scoffed. "Typical. They don't care about us, Kyle. We're just bodies to them. They don't even notice when we bust our asses." Jack's heart sank. These weren't disgruntled workers slacking off. They were frustrated, overworked, and clearly felt undervalued. And the worst part, it wasn't just them. Throughout the day, Jack overheard similar complaints from other employees. A cook in the back vented about broken equipment that never got fixed. A shift supervisor muttered about being asked to work through her break. Jack couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing inside him. This wasn't the company he had built, or at least, it wasn't supposed to be. But how had it gotten this bad? Was this just a one-off location, or was this happening across the board? He didn't have answers yet, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't ignore what he was seeing. During his break, Jack sat in the cramped employee room, sipping a bottle of water and observing the interactions around him. Maya sat across the table, scrolling through her phone with a scowl on her face. Kyle microwaved a bowl of soup, looking exhausted. "Hey, how long have you worked here?" Jack asked Kyle, keeping his voice casual. "About 6 months, Kyle said. "Feels like 6 years, though," Maya snorted. "Yeah, that's about right. People don't last long here, most quit after a few weeks." "Why's that?" Jack pressed. Maya looked at him like he'd asked the dumbest question in the world. "Because it's a nightmare. The pay sucks, the hours suck, and management doesn't care. Like, I had a full-on panic attack last week because I was so stressed, and you know what my manager said? Can you finish your shift first? Like, are you kidding me?" Jack felt a pang of guilt. He wanted to defend the company, to explain that this wasn't how things were supposed to be, but how could he? He was undercover, and besides, it was clear these employees weren't exaggerating. Later that evening, as Jack drove home, he replayed everything he'd seen and heard. He felt a mix of emotions: anger, disappointment, and above all, self-doubt. How had he let this happen? Had he been so focused on growing the business that he'd lost sight of what mattered? These workers weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, they were people, and they deserved better. As he parked in his driveway, Jack knew he couldn't just sit back and wait for things to change on their own. He had to dig deeper, find out how widespread these issues were, and figure out a way to fix them. But first, he needed to return to the store, and this time, he'd push harder to uncover the truth. The next morning, Jack arrived at the store early, determined to dig deeper into the heart of the issues. He'd barely clocked in when the manager, a sharp-tongued woman named Denise, barked orders from the back office. "Dan, don't just stand there. Stock the napkins and clean the drink station before the lunch rush hits," she snapped, not even looking up from her clipboard. Jack nodded, keeping his head low. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, shuffling toward the drink station. Denise barely acknowledged him, too busy complaining into her phone about being short-staffed again and having to babysit the crew. As the morning wore on, Jack noticed a clear pattern. Denise rarely left the back office unless it was to criticize someone. She spent more time micromanaging schedules from her desk than actually leading the team. Meyer and Kyle handled most of the front-of-house chaos, doing their best to juggle orders and clean up messes while Denise barked commands over the headset. By mid-morning, Jack got his first real chance to talk to Meyer again. She was wiping down tables, her movements hurried but precise. "Maya," Jack said quietly, "you seem to know this place inside out. Do you ever get feedback or recognition for all the work you do?" She glanced at him, surprised by the question. "Recognition?" she repeated, almost laughing. "No, Denise doesn't even know half of what we do. She just yells when something goes wrong." Jack frowned. "So she doesn't step in to help?" Maya shook her head. "Not a chance. She sits in her office and complains about how we're incompetent, but if we didn't pick up the slack, this place would fall apart." Jack's chest tightened. This was worse than he'd imagined. He decided to test the waters further. "Have you ever thought about leaving?" Maya let out a bitter laugh. "Of course, but I need the money. My mom's sick and I'm paying for her meds. So here I am." She paused, then added, "Kyle's already looking for another job, though. He can't take it anymore." Jack's mind raced. He felt a deep respect for Maya's resilience, but he also felt an urgent need to confront the real issue: Denise. Later that day, the breaking point came. It was during the lunch rush, and the kitchen was overwhelmed. Orders were coming in faster than the team could fill them. Kyle accidentally dropped a burger on the floor while rushing to plate an order. Denise stormed out of her office. "Kyle, are you serious?" "That's coming out of your paycheck," she shouted, loud enough for customers to hear. Kyle froze, his face turning red. "I didn't mean to, I don't care," Denise snapped. "You're costing us money with your carelessness. Maybe if you focused instead of whining about your hours, this wouldn't happen." Jack couldn't take it anymore. He stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Denise, it was an accident. He's doing his best." She turned to him, glaring. "And who are you to tell me how to run my store? You've been here, 2 days? Stay in your lane, Dan." The tension was palpable. Customers whispered among themselves, and Kyle looked like he wanted to shrink into the floor. Jack clenched his fists but stayed silent, knowing he couldn't blow his cover just yet. The rest of the shift was tense. Denise retreated to her office, but the damage was done. Jack could see the defeat in Kyle's posture and the frustration in Maya's eyes. When his shift ended, Jack didn't go straight home. Instead, he sat in his car in the parking lot, staring at the store. He knew he couldn't wait any longer. It was time to call a team meeting. The next morning, Jack arrived at the store early again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Two regional managers from corporate accompanied him, both trusted employees who knew about his undercover mission. They stayed discreet, blending in as they observed the morning operations. By noon, Jack had seen enough. He stepped into the back office where Denise was once again glued to her desk. "Denise," he said, his voice steady, "we need to talk." She barely looked up. "Can it wait? I'm busy." "No," Jack said firmly, pulling off his glasses and wig. "It can't." Denise's face went pale as recognition dawned. "Mr. Coleman," she stammered. "That's right," Jack said, crossing his arms, "and I've seen enough to know this store is not being run the way it should be." Denise opened her mouth to respond, but Jack held up a hand. "Save it. We'll talk later. For now, gather the team. I'm addressing everyone." Minutes later, the entire staff stood in the dining area, their faces a mix of confusion and curiosity. Jack stood at the front, his disguise gone. "I'm Jack Coleman," he began, "the founder of Burger Barn. For the past 3 days, I've been working here undercover to see what's really going on in my company, and let me tell you, what I've seen has been eye-opening." He paused, scanning the room. "I want to start by apologizing because clearly, we've let you down. This company was built on treating employees like family, and somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. That changes today." Jack turned to Kyle and Maya. "Kyle, Maya, you've gone above and beyond to keep this place running, even when you weren't given the support you deserved. Starting today, both of you are getting raises, and I'll personally make sure you get the hours and flexibility you need." Kyle's jaw dropped. "Wait, seriously?" "Seriously," Jack said with a small smile. He turned back to the group. "As for Denise, there will be an investigation into her conduct. For now, she's suspended." Denise looked furious but said nothing, knowing she was outnumbered. Jack took a deep breath. "I'm also implementing new policies to ensure this doesn't happen again. Regular equipment checks, anonymous employee feedback systems, and mandatory leadership training for all managers." The room was silent for a moment before Maya spoke up. "Thank you," she said softly. Jack nodded. "No, thank you. You're the heart of this company, and I won't forget that again." As the meeting ended, the atmosphere in the store felt lighter, almost hopeful. Jack knew there was still work to be done, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right track. The next week brought swift changes. Jack hadn't just left the team meeting with promises, he left with a plan. The regional managers were tasked with handling operations at the store for now, while Jack focused on implementing reforms that would ripple through every Burger Barn location. But first, he needed to check back in with Kyle and Maya, the employees who had unknowingly been the turning point for the company's transformation. Jack returned to the store a few days later, this time as himself, no disguise, no wig, no prosthetics. As he walked through the front doors, the staff glanced at him with curiosity and nervous energy. Word had spread quickly about the undercover boss, and though most of the team seemed relieved, there was still an air of uncertainty. Kyle was working the register, his usual timid demeanor replaced with what looked like cautious optimism. He froze when he saw Jack, then gave a small, unsure wave. "Hi, mister." "Coleman," Kyle said, his voice quieter than usual. "Jack," he corrected with a warm smile. "How's it going today, Kyle?" Kyle hesitated. "It's better, a lot better actually. The regional managers have been helping out and, Denise isn't here, so that's been nice." Jack nodded. "Good to hear. But I didn't just come to check in, I want to talk to you and Maya when you both have a moment. Can you take your break soon?" Kyle nodded quickly. Yeah, I'll grab her." Minutes later, Kyle and Maya joined Jack at one of the tables in the dining area. Jack had intentionally chosen a quiet time, ensuring they wouldn't feel rushed or watched by customers. Maya sat down cautiously, her arms crossed. "Okay, what's this about?" she asked bluntly, though there was no malice in her tone. Jack leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I just wanted to thank you both again. You didn't just keep this store running, you opened my eyes. You were honest, even when you didn't know who I was, and that honesty has already started making a difference." Maya raised an eyebrow. "So does that mean Denise is gone for good?" Jack sighed. "Her suspension is still in effect, and we're conducting a thorough investigation. I can't promise you anything yet, but I can promise that she won't come back unless she proves she's capable of leading with respect and fairness. If she doesn't, she's out." "Simple as that." Kyle looked down at the table. "That's good. I mean, it's fair," Jack nodded. "It is. But let's talk about you two for a second. I've had HR look into your schedules and pay, and I've already approved raises for both of you. Kyle, you'll also have the option to reduce your hours if you need to focus on school or other commitments." Kyle's eyes widened. "Wait, really?" "Really," Jack said. Then he turned to Maya. "And Maya, I know you've taken on a lot here. I want to offer you a pathway to move up in the company if that's something you're interested in. Leadership training, mentorship, anything you need. You've got the drive, and I'd hate to see it go to waste." Maya stared at him, clearly unsure how to process the offer. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Jack said. "You've been doing a manager's job without the title or the pay. That ends now." For a moment, Maya didn't say anything, then she laughed a short, incredulous laugh. "Wow, okay. I guess I'll think about it." Jack smiled. He could tell Maya wasn't the type to jump into anything without considering every angle, and he respected that. "Take your time," he said. "But no matter what you decide, just know that we're working to make this a better place to work for everyone." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the kitchen door swinging open. One of the cooks, an older man named Lewis, stepped out, wiping his hands on his apron. "Mr. Coleman," Lewis said hesitantly, "can I talk to you for a second?" Jack glanced at Kyle and Maya, then back at Lewis. "Of course." Lewis motioned for Jack to follow him into the kitchen. Once they were alone, Lewis spoke quietly, as if afraid someone might overhear. "I've been with this company for 10 years, Lewis began, "and I've seen managers come and go. But the way Denise treated us, it wasn't right. She didn't just yell, she humiliated people. I stayed quiet because I thought no one cared, but seeing you here, it gives me hope." Jack felt a lump in his throat. "Lewis, I'm sorry you had to endure that. No one should feel like they can't speak up. That's going to change. We're setting up an anonymous hotline for employees to report issues directly to corporate. No more fear of retaliation." Lewis nodded slowly. "That's good. Real good. Thank you." When Jack left the store that day, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. But he also knew that words alone wouldn't fix the deeper, systemic issues. He needed to show his employees at every level that the company was serious about change. Over the next month, Jack worked tirelessly with his corporate team to implement new policies. Managers across the chain were required to complete leadership training, focusing on communication, conflict resolution, and employee well-being. Stores received budget increases for equipment repairs and maintenance, ensuring that employees had the tools they needed to do their jobs effectively. At the same time, Jack made a point to visit more locations in person, not undercover, but as himself. He wanted to hear directly from employees and customers to rebuild the trust that had been lost. Back at the suburban location where it all began, the changes were already making a difference. With Denise gone, the atmosphere was lighter and the team seemed more cohesive. Maya had accepted the mentorship program, and Kyle was thriving with his adjusted schedule. One afternoon, as Jack walked into the store unannounced, he noticed something that brought a smile to his face. Maya was training a new hire, her voice calm and encouraging. Kyle was at the register, confidently handling a line of customers. And Lewis. He was whistling as he flipped burgers, a rare moment of ease in the usually hectic kitchen. Jack knew there was still work to do, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like the company was heading in the right direction. Burger Barn wasn't just a business, it was a community. And Jack was determined to make it one worth being a part of. 2 months later, Jack sat in a modest, windowless conference room at Burger Barn's headquarters. On the table in front of him were stacks of reports from the regional managers, detailing the progress of the new policies. He ran a hand through his hair, exhausted but determined. The changes were working incrementally but undeniably working. Employee satisfaction scores were ticking up, turnover rates were slowing. But there was still one unresolved issue weighing on him: Denise. The investigation into her conduct was complete, and the findings weren't great. Multiple employees had reported incidents of verbal abuse, favoritism, and even outright neglect of her responsibilities. At the same time, Denise's file included years of strong performance reviews from her previous positions. She wasn't a simple villain, she was a capable manager who had lost her way under the pressure of running one of the chain's busiest stores. Jack had to decide whether she deserved another chance. He called a meeting with Denise that afternoon. She arrived looking uneasy, her usual sharp confidence subdued. She sat across from Jack, clutching her purse tightly. "Denise," Jack began, his tone firm but not unkind, "thank you for coming in. I'll get straight to the point. The investigation into your management practices at the suburban store is complete, and we need to talk about where we go from here." Denise nodded, her jaw tight. "I understand." Her voice was quieter than Jack had ever heard it. "I've read the reports," Jack continued, "and I won't sugarcoat it. There were serious issues, unacceptable behavior toward your staff, a lack of presence during critical times, and a failure to address basic operational needs. These aren't small things." Denise flinched but remained silent. "However," Jack said, leaning forward, "I also see potential in you. Your history with Burger Barn shows that you can be a strong leader. I believe you got overwhelmed and let that pressure affect your judgment. So here's what I'm offering." Denise's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of hope breaking through her guarded expression. "You're being reassigned to a smaller, lower-volume location," Jack explained. "It's not a punishment, it's a chance for you to rebuild. You'll also be required to complete our leadership training program and work with a mentor for at least 6 months. If you can prove that you've learned from this experience, there's a path for you to return to a higher-level role. But if I hear even one more complaint about mistreatment or neglect, you're out. No second chances after this." Denise exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging with a mix of relief and humility. "Thank you, Mr. Coleman. I won't let you down," Jack nodded. "I hope not. And Denise, don't forget the people working under you are the backbone of this company. Respect them, listen to them, and treat them the way you'd want to be treated. That's non-negotiable." With that, Denise left to begin her reassignment. Jack felt a weight lift off his shoulders. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the fairest one he could come up with. The next week, Jack returned to the suburban store to check on Maya, Kyle, and the rest of the team. As he stepped inside, he was greeted by the smell of fresh burgers and the sound of lively chatter. The atmosphere was unrecognizable from the tense, chaotic environment he'd encountered during his undercover stint. Maya was working the floor as the acting manager, an interim promotion Jack had personally approved. She was delegating tasks with confidence, her voice steady and encouraging. Kyle was training a new hire at the register, his once timid demeanor replaced by a quiet self-assurance. "Maya," Jack called out as he approached the counter. She turned, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Jack, what are you doing here?" "Just stopping by to see how things are going," he said, smiling. "Looks like you've got everything under control." Maya shrugged but couldn't hide her pride. It's been good. The team's working well together and the new policies have made a huge difference. The anonymous hotline, genius. People actually feel like they can speak up now, Jack nodded. That's great to hear, and how about you? How are you handling the interim manager role? It's a lot of work, Meyer admitted, but I like it. I'm learning a ton, and honestly, it feels good to finally have a say in how things are run. Jack reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Well, I've got one more thing for you. Corporate approved your permanent promotion to store manager. It's official. Maya's jaw dropped. Wait, what? Are you serious? Completely, Jack said, grinning. You've earned it. For a moment, Maya just stared at him as if waiting for the punchline. When it didn't come, she broke into a wide smile. Thank you. Seriously, thank you. Jack turned to Kyle, who had been watching the exchange from the register. And Kyle, don't think I've forgotten about you. HR mentioned you're starting college classes soon. Kyle nodded, a little sheepishly. Yeah, just part-time. Well, Jack said, we're setting up an education assistance program for employees like you. Starting next semester, Burger Barn will help cover a portion of your tuition. Kyle's eyes widened. Are you kidding me? That's wow, thank you, Mr. Coleman. Jack, he corrected with a smile. And you're welcome. As Jack left the store, he took a moment to reflect on everything that had happened. The past few months had been some of the most challenging of his career, but they'd also been the most rewarding. He'd seen firsthand the struggles of his employees, and he'd learned the value of staying connected to the people who made his company what it was. Burger Barn wasn't perfect, not yet. But it was on its way, and Jack knew one thing for certain: he'd never let himself lose sight of the ground floor again.